Yo, here's a little intro to this episode because it turned out a lot longer than I expected. So I just thought I'd explain what the heck this is. So with COVID and being trapped in my hometown of Fredericton, New Brunswick, I just thought I'd do a little virtual travel podcast of just a memory I had of visiting Japan. This one's about Fukuoka and a big cool mountain. So if that sounds cool to you, you can just listen to the tale of a guy traveling. I have no idea if that is appealing to anybody, but it was a lot of fun for me to do. Just a nice way to remember those nice traveling times. But it's like 2 goddamn hours. I talk about this for fucking ever. So if you're in, let's do this, and we'll break up the segments with some Sega Genesis music. Bam! I'm standing in the middle of a snowy forest, and it's all dark and cold. So I thought, let's teleport to the exact opposite. Let's go to southern Japan in the height of summer. Hot, sunny, the reverse of frozen Canada. I just wanted to talk about, I'm going to call this episode Introvert Holiday, or Introvert's Holiday. Because when I travel, it's really weird. I don't really do things, so to speak. I don't hang out with people that much. I just kind of do my own thing, and that's what I like the best. Like, for instance, the place I stayed when I first got to Japan, I basically just looked for one of the cheaper accommodations I could find, and it was like a hostel kind of thing, communal bunks. I think there was like 10 bunks in this one room, kind of like bunk beds, but each one was kind of its own little box. You know, you had your little box, you could go in and pull the curtain. And basically I had this prepaid credit card because I'm not a real citizen of the world, and it could only process $1,000 at once. So basically I just decided, like, let's see how many days I can stay in Tokyo for $1,000. And it was a lot. It was like 47 or 48 days at this place. And it turned out to be 4 stops away from Ikebukuro, which I had never heard of before, but I ended up really loving Ikebukuro because it's less famous than all the big places. You know, it's not Shibuya or Shinjuku or Akihabara, but it's got all of that stuff. It's like a smaller version of all of that stuff. Like, I kind of didn't like Shibuya and Shinjuku that much because they were so crowded. And I liked Akihabara, but it was kind of overwhelming. Like, that's the anime and video game place, but it's just everywhere. Where Ikebukuro has shopping, it has restaurants. On one side, it's kind of seedy. I actually kind of really like that side, where it's just like, here's where just people are wandering the streets drunk in the bars, and that place was just cool. But then on the other side, on the more developed side, like, it does have anime stores, and that famous video game shop, Super Potato, there's a second Super Potato that no one ever talks about, but it's in Ikebukuro. It's got a big mall with a Pokemon center, and I don't know, it's cool. I like that place. So I liked being in Tokyo, but I found I liked it better as the tourist season kind of passed, and my pretty crowded hostel just kept emptying out more and more because I was staying there for such a ludicrously long time. You know, everyone else would stay for like a week maybe, and I was there for 40 days. It eventually hit the point where Golden Week was over and there just wasn't any big stuff happening. And it literally reached a point where it was just me in there. And I loved it so much because it was this like 2-story building. My room had like 10 bunks. Downstairs there was another 6 bunks, I think. And yeah, once everybody left, it was so cool because, you know, there's like all these different showers, and they were all just for me. Different washrooms. Like, I had a washroom where I had the toilet seat up and a different washroom where I had the toilet seat down, and I could just go to whichever washroom I wanted. I felt rich. I felt crazy rich, because in this pretty populated, relatively famous part of Japan, I had a 2-story building that was just mine for like less than $30 a day. So I'd go explore Tokyo and go to these different places and look around, and then when I came back, like, there wasn't even staff there because there was no one new to check in. I had a code for the door. It was just me, and I was like, this is so crazy. Like, going to the bottom of the listing can really be neat sometimes, because you never know, maybe you'll be super crowded and it'll be super packed, and at first it was that. But how things ended up, I never could have predicted. And just imagine, like, to rent a 2-story building for yourself. You'd have to be the richest person in the world. But instead, I got that because I'm the poorest person in the world, or I act that way when I travel. And yeah, that's when I first started keying into the idea that it's like, yeah, I like the introvert's holiday. Like, it was useful when I first arrived in Japan to have all these people around in case I needed someone for something, in case I had problems with something or whatever. It was like comforting to have other people around. But once they were all gone, I was like, this is even more comforting. This rules. And then occasionally for like the weekend, 1 or 2 other people would come in, and it would be more like a traditional hostel again, but then they would leave and it would be all mine again. I'm just like, this is the best. I love it. And then the introvert ante really upped when I went to Fukuoka. So Fukuoka, again, I'd never heard of the place. It's just that my friend Brad was staying there. So I took a little flight. I don't know, it was like maybe an hour, a really cheap little flight. Arrived in Fukuoka, and it was so cool because Fukuoka's in the south of Japan, and it's like, I don't know, the 5th largest city or something. It's still a pretty large city, but it's just not Kyoto. It's not Yokohama. It's not famous, But it's got the greatest airport setup in the world. Like, you take the subway from the airport, like a couple of stops, and you're in the center of Fukuoka. It's pretty awesome. But I got there pretty late, so I didn't hang out with Brad that first day. I just had to go find my new Airbnb. And my phone didn't have a data plan or anything. I just wrote down all the directions ahead of time, and then I could get Wi-Fi whenever I was by a convenience store, just to double check where I was going. So it's always weird to just go into the great unknown, this place I've never been. I'm getting a little familiar with Japan at this point, but it's still relatively new, and I mean, I can't speak Japanese, I can't read Japanese. So it's like, all right, it's getting a little late, it's getting dark, but let's go figure this out. So I had to transfer trains, like I had to leave the subway in downtown Fukuoka and walk to Tenjin Minami Station. So that was my first view of Fukuoka, where I was right downtown. It's nighttime, everything's beautiful, and that's where all the big buildings are. And it's that classic look of Japan, where it's just like neon lights everywhere and everything's awesome. And this was the middle of summer, so it was really warm. And I saw like a little lizard or a gecko or something run by. And I'm like, man, that's so cool. Like, we just don't have those in Canada. You just don't see those. And I stumbled around a little and got a little lost and found some Wi-Fi, and then found my way to the other subway. And then I had to take it way out, like 13 stops to Umebayashi Station, it was called. And once I got to Umebayashi Station, it's the middle of nowhere. It's quite far on the outskirts of Fukuoka. And how Fukuoka's laid out is there's a beach at one end. Downtown is like the beach. And then on the other end, it's surrounded by mountains. And I was right by the mountains now. I actually think more so than a data plan, I could kind of use like a compass, like an honest-to-God compass, to know which cardinal direction I'm going in, because I get lost easily. I never can get my bearings, especially when I come out from underground. I'm just totally lost. It messed me up in New York all the time. Anytime I had to take the subway, I'm like, okay, where am I now? Like, I just lose all sense of connection to where I've been and where I am now. So I just picked a direction and I just started walking, and it turns out I was going exactly the wrong way. But it was still cool. It's just night, and now this is like quiet. You can hear the cicadas and like frogs. There's rice fields and stuff. It's quite rural. And I'm just walking down this little street at night, and I walked past, there's the the drink machines everywhere in Japan, and it's just like, this just feels so cool. This is so neat. But then it started raining and thunder and lightning. I could see lightning in the distance, and I'm like, oh man, I hope I'm going the right way. This could get bad fast, because like when a storm hits in Japan, it hits fast and it can be real bad. But I saw a 7-Eleven in the distance. That was like I'm just so lowbrow, but my favorite thing in Japan was just the convenience stores. I ate from the convenience stores all the time. I oriented myself through convenience stores. I remember one time just exploring, I got off the subway in Tokyo at Ueno, and I didn't really put together that Ueno is next door to the Akihabara neighborhood, but I realized it when I walked past a Family Mart, and I was like, I've been to that Family Mart, I bought noodles there. Wait a second, I know how to get to Akihabara from here. And then I did it, and I'm like, man, that's the best. I can navigate by convenience stores. I have like a great mind for remembering convenience stores. I can tell, even though I saw 300 Family Marts while I was there, I'm like, no, I recognize this one. I know this one from the other ones. But yeah, walking at night in Fukuoka, it's starting to rain. I saw 7-Eleven. So I went and stood out front, stood under an awning, checked the Wi-Fi, and realized like, whoa, no, I'm going exactly the wrong way. But I got my bearings again. I got a better sense of the local geography through the little map, and I'm like, okay, I know where to go. And I'd only walked 10 or 15 minutes the wrong way. It wasn't that bad. So I walked in the right direction, and the rain didn't quite kick in while I was outside, so I got lucky. But I found my way to my Airbnb, and this place was a 2-story apartment building with maybe 8 apartments, and just one of them was the Airbnb I was renting. And this place was a little more expensive than Tokyo, but still quite a good deal, because we're in a more obscure city now, and I'm not in the center, I'm out on the edge. Anyway, there's a dog barking now, so I'm gonna have to go find another part of the woods. So I found my way to my Airbnb, and yeah, it was this apartment that was really cool, because yeah, it was just a normal Japanese apartment complex where just one of the units was an Airbnb rental. So it was my first taste of a legit Japanese apartment experience. Like if you go on YouTube and you watch people do apartment tours, that's what this was. So I went in, and yeah, just right away there's the little area at the start where you got to take your shoes off. The bathroom was just like a little tub, a little square tub, but the whole bathroom is like waterproof, like the whole place is like a big shower kind of, which is just cool. The toilet itself was in a separate room on the other side of the hall. And then the place itself was this big room with a second floor, like it had a ladder that you could climb up to go up to a loft area where there was a bunch of bedding. And it was just beautiful. What a beautiful apartment. And it had a TV. My place before didn't have TV. So because I was thinking that, I was like, I'd kind of like to just watch some Japanese TV just to soak it in. Why not? And this place had a TV and a Blu-ray player, just had stuff. I opened up the curtain and stepped out onto the balcony, and you could hear cicadas and frogs really loudly. And it was like pretty dark at this point, but I could see just the dim outline of the mountains, and they were like close. They were like a 10-minute walk away. It was this gorgeous view, because I was on the second floor, and the ground kind of sloped away to like a rice field, and on the other side of it was a greenhouse, and then a street, and then the mountains started. So it was just this amazing view of the mountains. And that's when I got a little message from the Airbnb people just making sure I found the place okay. And that's the first thing I said was like, yeah, I found it. And like, oh, those mountains. Look how awesome those are. And that's what this whole episode's going to be about, is those mountains. Right away, my first thing that caught my eye, this Airbnb, these mountains. They became like what I was obsessed with the whole time I was in Fukuoka. But that night I just chilled. There was like a 7-Eleven also really close to there, just like a couple of minute walk. And I just can't overstate how much I love Japanese convenience stores. They're so awesome. Like, especially at this point, I really didn't eat anywhere except convenience stores. But I didn't really feel like it was a big problem that I always ate at the convenience stores, because the convenience stores are awesome. Like, you can get weird candy and stuff, which is really good in Japan, but you can also get pretty legit meals. Like, you can get really fancy ramen. Like, compared to our like Mr. Noodle stuff, this stuff is amazing, so much better. But you can get like hard-boiled eggs and chicken breasts and all these sides, and you can just add it all together and you can have like a real meal. It's awesome. My problem wasn't eating at convenience stores. It was that I literally have a small stomach. I got an MRI once and I found out my organs are small. Like, I just can't eat a lot. So my whole problem was just like, I wish I could get hungry again. There's only so many times I can go to these convenience stores every day, and I just want to go more. I love it. So I went there and, I don't know, just bought some chips, and you can just buy beer at the convenience store, which is so nice because you can't do that in Canada. And I just hung out in that awesome apartment, watched some Japanese TV, which was also interesting because my impression of Japanese TV was not really at all accurate, because we only get like the highlights, you know? We get the wacky commercials and we get the funny stuff and the cool shows and like if there's some weird game show that really stands out, we might get that. And obviously we get anime and stuff and just the really funny commercials, where when you see actual Japanese TV, it's so much more mundane than that. But it's just kind of nice. It was just comfortable to I would watch TV and just listen to a podcast at the same time, because I couldn't understand the TV anyway. So I was just watching the visuals, but just to get that feeling of the vibe of like, it's different than watching an imported show. You really feel like, how often do the commercials happen? What are the commercials really like? They're not like these crazy commercials that you see in YouTube compilations. They're much more normal than that. And it's just, I don't know, it's interesting. It was just kind of, just so comfortable, just so neat. Like, I really am a lowbrow traveler. I don't need to see fancy landmarks. I don't need to see famous stuff. I just want to go to the convenience store and watch TV. You know, it's just cool. But yeah, the next day I went downtown. I met up with Brad. I got to learn about downtown Fukuoka and the real city. And like, it's beautiful, but that's a different story. You know, if you look up anyone's YouTube videos about Fukuoka, that's what you'll see. You'll see all that stuff, and it's pretty cool. But I had 3 weeks booked in Fukuoka. I did it like I sandwiched it, where it was Tokyo, Fukuoka, back to Tokyo, and then out. So I had 3 weeks, and of course I would wake up every morning at that Airbnb and I would open up the curtains, and unless I was planning to go downtown to hang out with Brad, I always saw those mountains, and I'm like, man, they're right there. Look at those mountains. I got to figure out how to get to those mountains. I got to do that. So the first day I tried to approach the mountains. I mean, it didn't seem like it should be that hard because they're right there. They're right in front of me. They're really close. But I went to the 7-Eleven, I bought some water and some snacks and whatever, and I tried to get to the mountain, and I failed because Japanese neighborhoods are really complicated, really circuitous. The streets kind of just go off in random directions. Things aren't straight lines. It's not a grid like we're used to in North America. So I would try to approach the mountain, but then there'd be someone's house. And you can't just cut through the lawn of someone's house. You know, you can't just cut through their property. And even if you could, it seems like the mountain is just, the trees start right away. Like, the mountains are really densely covered in trees, much more so than here in Canada. So even if I did cut through someone's yard, which I wasn't going to do, then what? I knew there had to be a better way to approach these. But I walked around that whole afternoon just it seems like I was getting further and further from my goal. I kept rambling my way through different streets and through different little neighborhoods and just circling all around in these little teeny tiny rural streets with There's really not usually sidewalks anyway in Japan, except for really major streets, but these were really short. It was really weird that I was even walking around them, you know? A lot of sharp turns where they would set up a mirror so you could see if someone was coming. And I basically just rambled around for 2 or 3 hours, just getting hotter and hotter, and I went through all my snacks and I drank all my liquids, and I was like, whew, this just didn't work, and it is so hot out and so sunny. I am just dying. So I made my way back to the 7-Eleven, I bought some more stuff, and just went back to the Airbnb to hang out in the shade, and just like, okay, day 1 didn't work, failure. And I think at that point, if I remember right, I did kind of start aiming myself in the other direction more, of like, all right, let's go the other way instead. Like, instead of taking the train into central Fukuoka, what if I just walk? How long would that take? And it was a while. It would take like a couple hours to walk to like Fukuoka Tower and then to the beaches behind that. And Brad lived sort of over by Hakata Station, so that was another probably 90 minutes or so to walk over there. But it was all really nice. It was just cool to walk through the city and just the little stuff I would find. Like, Fukuoka is so mountainous. It's so cool how, like, I would just be walking along and just find a park that was just not really that big, but just like a big mountain, just all of a sudden. It's like you're playing Sim City or Populous or something, one of those God games where you design the terrain, and someone just clicked, boop, 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 put a mountain right here. Like, I remember this one park, I think I was looking for a washroom. I just had to pee a little bit, and I was like, okay, I think this is a park, let's go in. But it was so steep up this trail, and I did find a washroom, and there was another like little lizard in there who was just hanging out on this ceiling. Like, I found that so weird. Like, it's one thing, even to be on a wall, it's like, wow, that's a pretty weird place to just be hanging out. But to be literally upside down, and this thing just seemed comfortable as whatever. Like, hey man, I'm just resting upside down. Don't worry about me. And then I got to the top of this little mini mountain, and there was like this beautiful view, this lookout that was set up deliberately so you could just like stand there and look at this perfect view all the way out to the ocean. And I didn't really stand out much. Like, so what? I'm just some white guy in Japan. Like, that's not uncommon. I very rarely stood out in any situation I was in. But that was one of them where I did get a couple little, like, you can just feel that different vibe. Just a little, not impolite or anything, but just that look of like, hey, how'd you get here? Like, what are you doing here? How do you even know this is a thing? And, you know, I just give the unspoken, like, I don't know this is a thing. I didn't know. I'm here by accident. Hey, hello. You know? Because I guess it is kind of weird because, like, walking from Umebayashi to the Fukuoka Tower, there are no subways along that route. I'm just walking through pure Fukuoka, you know, not a place that any touristy person would ever normally be. And then to find this cool little park. I found another one later, too, that was much bigger, but it was a similar thing. It was like a park you walk in and you circle around and weave your way up. And there were all these homeless cats in it, like a lot of them. And then at the top, I found a little guy selling hot dogs. I'm like, wow, weird, cool, all right. But yeah, for a while I experimented with that. Like, let's just walk to the beach, let's hang out there, let's see that side of Fukuoka. But then every morning I would wake up and I would look out the window. And now that it's all bright and sunny and I can see everything clearly, like it wasn't that, you know, just the looming shadow of the mountain anymore. Now I can see that mountain clear as day, every day. And it's like, I gotta figure this out. How do I get to that mountain? What's going on? So I was walking around at random, and like this neighborhood, there's nothing there. There's no coffee shops, there's no anything that fits with me, you know, nowhere I can go, no little malls. Any restaurants and stuff are just so local and so, like, just beyond my comfort level as a weird introvert to try to go to. It was just 7-Eleven and drink machines and just wandering to feel what Japan feels like. But as I was walking around, there was this one neighborhood not too far from my Airbnb that really encroached a lot on the mountains. So much so that the streets that led up to these apartments were like really steep, like way up. And I thought I would just go up there and just look around, just see what was there. So I just walked up these streets to these apartment complexes and stuff that are at the very foot of the mountain. And as I was wandering around, I found these steps that you couldn't see from a distance. Even when you're right by them, you couldn't see them. You had to kind of be at the right angle. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's these really long stairs, like really long. It reminded me of the first King's Quest game, these steps you have to walk up to go up to the giant in the clouds. It's just like, whoa, how did I not see those? How could I miss those? Those are the longest steps ever. But I'm like, all right, let's go up those and just see what happens. And I went up them and they were so long I had to stop halfway up and just breathe in and out 10 times slowly to get my get my breath back. Finally made it all the way to the top, and there were these little benches, and again, what was like a little observation area, except there were so many trees around you couldn't really see. And more steps on the other side that went down. And then this area that didn't really look like a path because it was just like rock. It was like rock with like a little space hewn through it where water had clearly flowed for a long, long time, and it had worn down this big rock. But it was like kind of a path. Basically, there was a sign I couldn't read, but a sign pointing that way that said something. And I was like, all right, like, this doesn't really look like a place you should necessarily be walking, but what does that sign mean? It's got to mean something, Let's just check it out. And again, it was really hot. It was the middle of the day. And I didn't have anything with me. I didn't have any drinks, any snacks, anything. But I was like, well, let me just go check it out real quick. Let me just go see what's up there. And that's when I discovered the way up the mountain. But I was unprepared for the odyssey I was about to go on. So I think that's a good place to stop for today. My fingers are getting a little cold standing in the middle of this frozen Canadian forest. I will say though, just to give this little Canadian forest its due, this is cool in its own way. This really is the exact opposite of the beautiful, lush Kyushu, Japan in the summertime, just like beautiful, warm, amazing, where this is dark and cold and snowy. But earlier, while I was recording, a cyclist went by and I could see him in the distance with his headlamp and just see the light go by in the distance through the trees, and then it wound around and he kind of went pretty close to where I am and just cycled past. And it really is beautiful in a different way. It's like these roaming ghost lights in the trees. Like, I know once COVID eventually passes and I'm able to travel again, I know I'm going to think back to this and I'm going to remember like, oh, you remember how cool that was? All the cyclists and the joggers and stuff and the trees at night and the snow, and just how pretty that was and how weird and eerie, and how that's not something I've ever seen anywhere else. That only seems to happen here. Because we have these woods, but because they're in the middle of the city, they're very safe and people can just be here at night and they don't think that that's a weird thing to do. I know when I'm eventually somewhere else, I'm going to think back to this. It's just hard to realize these moments at the time, Like, I'm here right now and it's hard to really appreciate it. It's just how my brain works, I guess. I know the nostalgia will hit later. Like when I was in Fukuoka, as much as I liked it, it just becomes your life for 3 weeks. It's just like, oh, I guess I'll just wake up and I'll go wander around and just see what's happening. And especially that area I was in, because it's on the edge of town, it was kind of industrial, just a lot of trucks and factory type stuff and fields, and it was like not special really. But now in my memory, when I think back, I'm like, so awesome. It was so awesome. It's weird. It's weird that I have such a hard time appreciating where I am right now. But I guess it's nice that my rose-colored glasses kick in so quickly and so strongly that I always appreciate where I just was. So hey, I'll take it. Whatever. At least I appreciate something. So I'm going to take a little break and I'll get back to my adventures on the mountain next time I'm out here wandering through the woods. Well, it's only a couple of days later, but man, it is so fucking cold. The babbling brook is all iced over. And yeah, walking around, it's just like the stinging cold on the face. My fingers were hurting even when they're in gloves. Like I gotta take my fingers out of the finger parts of the glove and just ball them up, and then it's sort of tolerable. Brutal. But still kind of weirdly nice. Like I was walking around earlier in the day and I just didn't feel like recording, where now that it's dark again, there is something nice about being in the woods at night. And I'm looking up and there's a half moon and I can see stars and there's these creepy trees all around me, and it is just, you do feel really enveloped. And it's not so bad in here. Like I've noticed being near woods now, almost no matter what the weather is, it's better in the woods. Like if it's crazy hot in the summer, it'll be more shaded in here. If it's raining, the rain gets diffused by the trees. If it's windy, it's less windy. When it's freezing cold, it's better in here. And it's like, oh yeah, I can kind of see what's going on if you're like an animal who has to live in the woods. Like the other day I saw a little like a shrew, sort of a little mouse type thing, running across the snow when the snow was still powdery, and then it like dove in the snow and burrowed away. And I'm like, God, what a life. You just got to run around in the snow all winter. But it really is nicer in here than it is out in the developed world. Like, not to get all hippie-ish, but clearly we're supposed to have trees all over the place. Once you clear cut all the trees, the weather just becomes a disaster. Of course, the exception is in the springtime and the early summer. Around these parts, this place will be filled with mosquitoes, so that's a different story. But yeah, since it's all cold and I can hear the creaking of the trees from the wind and stuff, let's continue my little mental journey back to the beautiful warmth. Fukuoka. So I kept seeing this mountain from my Airbnb, and I was like, I gotta walk up that mountain, I gotta do it. And I finally found the little trail inadvertently. I was just wandering through some little residential neighborhood, and I found the steps, the mythical super long steps, and I took them way, way up. And then I found this weird path that was kind of hewn in the rock. And it was kind of weird and kind of tough, but there was, like I said, there was a sign with an arrow pointing at something that said something. So I'm like, fuck it, dude. Let's check it out. So I started going up this thing, and it was a little tough, a little steep, kind of hard to get your footing, and because it's just smooth rock, a lot of it. That initial part was kind of tough. But once I got past that, it smoothed out into a regular path. And what was neat about it is that there were so many trees, just trees all over, really dense trees. Way more dense than like the trees I'm in right now are, there's a lot of trees, but there's space in between them. Where in Japan, it's just like if you see a mountain, it's just trees. Boom, it's just green. And when you're on the mountain, it's pretty similar. It just felt like walking through a path through the woods. And it was an upward incline, but it wasn't continuous. Like it would go up, and then it would smooth out a little, and it would go up again, and sometimes it would even dip down a little bit, and then up again. But I never really got the sense that I was walking up the ridge of a mountain, because I couldn't see anything around me except trees. But after not that long, 10 or 15 minutes, I got to this point where the trees opened up on one side. And I kind of stood up on a little stump that was there so I could see over the tree line of this opening. And then it was just like, boom, like, holy fuck. It's like what you see in like travel shows or something. I could see, I guess it would be western Fukuoka. I could just see all of it. I could just see the whole city. And you could see the water way in the distance and the mountains off even further in the distance, where it looks like a painting or a video game or a backdrop. It doesn't seem real, because you'll see like these mountains, and then way behind them are even more mountains, and then behind them are more mountains, and they they feel like they're flat, you know, they feel like it's a set for a play or something. And then all along the left side of what I was seeing was closer mountains. It was basically this mountain that I was on. It just kind of circled around and sort of encapsulated the whole town. And then looking down at the town, I could see the expressway, which is where the subway was. I was like, okay, since my Airbnb is really close to the subway, I followed the expressway and I'm like, okay, there's the expressway. All right, there's the subway. There's the greenhouse that I could see from my balcony. There's just the little corner tip of the 7-Eleven. So I triangulated and figured out like, oh, there's my Airbnb. There it is. And once I could see it, it was so cool because it's kind of up on a ridge. It's a fairly big building, a 2-story building that was really wide, you know, like 4 or 6 units wide, I'm not sure. But it was bright yellow. And it was the only yellow building anywhere around there. So it's like, where's Waldo? Or where's Wally for some of my European friends. It was just so cool that I could find it. I'm like, oh, look at there. Look at that down there. There's the Airbnb. That's where I was standing before when I was looking up at this mountain. Now I'm there. I'm at the mountain. I'm looking back. I've seen it from both sides. That's so cool. And it was such a beautiful view. And I'm like, this is the shit, dude. This is the fucking best. I love this. And the thing was, I wasn't that far yet because I could see my house, you know, I could see my Airbnb. It had only taken me about 15 minutes to walk up this high. And then from those big long steps that I found, I could probably walk back to the Airbnb in, 25, 30 minutes. If I was to turn around now, it's no big deal. I can get back to civilization very quickly. I'd found the way up. I'd found the way to the mountain. And it was really hot and I was really sweaty and I didn't have anything on me. No liquids, importantly. Nothing. But this path I was on, now that I was past the rocky part and I was on the proper walking path, it was a really well-trodden path, a really well-developed path. Like, you can't miss it. Like, this is the path. And it didn't branch off in any other ways because it really couldn't. It was on the ridge of the mountain. All you could do was follow the ridge. And it's just like, which way do I go? Do I go back down the way I came and come back here another day when I'm more prepared? Or do I just keep walking on the path and see what happens? And I mean, I'll be honest, it's not even a choice. It's like I have no choice. I feel compelled to go explore, like I have to. It's like my favorite thing to just explore a new place or examine a new place or kind of map something out in my brain. It just feels so good to me. So that's what happened to me in Fukuoka. I was like, I mean, the path keeps going. Where could it possibly go? I have no idea because I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the whole scene. This mountain just wraps all the way around Fukuoka. Fukuoka is not a small place. Where could this trail possibly go? You know? But I had to keep walking down the trail. I just had to. I had to know what was there. So I kept walking along this trail on the ridge of the mountain, and most of the time, like I said, it just felt like I was in woods. I couldn't really see much, but occasionally there'd be those breaks in the trees where you could see through and you could see down. And sometimes I could see the other side, the more like Fukuoka proper, the side that has the downtown and the airport and everything. And it was so small and so far down. Like I was just moving up and up and up this mountain. And it's weird too because I'm very afraid of heights, like very afraid of heights. But not on a mountain because it's just going up gradually. Like it's not something I can fall off, you know? If I fall, I just roll down a mountain, I guess. I don't know. That doesn't seem scary to me. I could survive that. It's not a plummet. But to go up in like a tower or something, there's no way. It's so scary to me. But I was like, yeah, this is nuts. I'm so high up. It's so crazy. But still you could hear like sometimes a siren or something or just like sound from the city that was way far away. And it's like, that is so weird. It's so crazy to be up on a mountain and the sound just travels through the air. So I followed along this path and it did have some pretty steep parts where it's like, whoa, I don't want to fall down there. That'd be bad. But that went for about 35 minutes, 40 minutes. it got to this kind of awkward spot where the trail kind of petered out again, and there was another one of these like rocks with little worn out spots, but it was much smaller. You just kind of scramble down the rocks, and there were little ribbons people had put in the trees, like, this is the way to go, follow this. And then there was a paved road. So this paved road area turned out to be kind of a fulcrum point. This was an important area, a little intersection maybe of places you could go. But I didn't notice any of those this first time. I was really hot and really sweaty, and I'm like, oh geez, where am I going? What am I doing? This was a mistake, dude. I'm fucking dying here. But the paved road kind of gave me hope. I'm like, oh, okay, look at this. It's a road, it's paved. And there are so many vending machines in Japan that I was like, who knows? I could literally walk past a vending machine at any point. But this is the paved road. Clearly, it's time to bail out now. Let's just follow the road. You can't go wrong with a road. It's a road. It has to go somewhere. It's a road. It's not a path in the woods anymore. So I started walking along this road, and I didn't expect it would take me that long because, like I said, it only took about 40 minutes to walk up this mountain path. But I guess the difference is I was going straight up, just straight up the ridge of the mountain, where a road needs to be a lot more gradual. It can't be that steep. So this thing, it was really kind of nice. It was a pretty small paved road. I didn't see a fucking soul on it. Certainly no vehicles. But it just wound its way slowly down the mountain. And it was such a long walk. I remember I was listening to a podcast. It was a wrestling podcast, and it was like a 2-hour-long podcast. And I listened to almost the whole thing walking down this path. It just meandered down the mountain so slow, so windy, just walking and walking and walking. And now it was like, hey, I was going downhill. Not so bad. Still quite a bit of trees around, so I'm not really in direct sunlight. But I don't know when I've ever been that thirsty. Just so thirsty, just walking and sweating and walking. But still beautiful, like especially pretty early on when I was still quite high up. There was one little side road that I was like, okay, let me just go check that out. And it went to this kind of cabin that was just sort of abandoned. There's quite a few of those in the mountains of Japan that I stumble across that are just, like supply sheds or something, but completely disused, like windows kind of broken, really worn down. It was clear no one was using it for anything. It was just an old abandoned, some kind of mountain outpost, I don't know. And the view from there, holy shit. Because before, from the ridge, I could only see one side of Fukuoka, and then there'd be a gap on the other side of the trees, and I could see a little bit of the other side. Here I could just see so much, and I was like way up in this weird side corner, just like in the corner of the city. Like there's very hard limits to that city because eventually you hit a mountain or you hit the water. So I was just kind of up in the corner, just like looking at the whole city, and it's just like, this is fucking awesome. It's so cool. That kind of access to nature is so great. Like, man, just that none of this was really that tough to get to. It wasn't that far from the subway to get to the start of this trail. And then I hadn't really been on the trail that long. I'm making a big deal about it, but only because I was so thirsty. It was all pretty accessible. And it's just beautiful. It's like a dream, I actually never ended up going back up that way because I found other places to go on the mountain. But even kind of the accident, my first attempt where I kind of went the wrong way was still beautiful. It was like 10 out of 10. So I kept walking and kept walking and kept walking and kept walking and winding my way down through the mountain. And finally, I kind of realized why I was in this weird place and I hadn't seen anyone and I hadn't seen any traffic or anything, because I got to a closed gate, and I was on the other side. Like, you're not supposed to be here, I don't know what the road is for. I guess just for forestry people, official people. But you're not supposed to go up this way. It's just because I snuck in through the back door. I came up through this weird little walking path and I ended up coming through this road the wrong way. So at the bottom, it was actually starting to get kind of dark. and I had to maneuver my way around this chained gate. And there were some little kids playing nearby, and they were like, what are you, who are you? Where are you coming from? And I just had to give them the little salute. Hello, what's up? I always kind of had to make an effort to say hello or konnichiwa, not to say hi, because normally I would say hi in Canada, but in Japanese, hi means yes. So just yes. It's just awkward. So I was tried to say hello. But yeah, it kind of came out into just this completely rural, residential type area. Coming down from the mountains, coming down from the access road that I wasn't supposed to be on. Definitely must have been weird. And then from there, I was like, now where the heck am I? What is going on? But again, like I was saying with Japan, how I love how many vending machines there are. Like, I think the stat is that there's like a vending machine for every 26 people or something in Japan. And it is true. Once you're back in any kind of civilization, it didn't take long for, I think it was like a closed garage, but it had a couple of vending machines in front. And by then it was pretty much dark, but man, those drinks tasted so good. Like, I did get a bottle of water like a responsible person and just drank the whole thing. But then I got like a weird little, it was some kind of like cherry, I don't know if it was peach or cherry blossom or what. It was some kind of weird soda thing, and just drank that. And I got like a melon soda and just drank that. And I'm like, okay, that's enough. There's more vending machines coming. Like, that was just like, let's just mega hydrate, because we made it. We made it on that silly long walk. And then I just started rambling through that neighborhood and kind of walking, and I could sort of see the lights of Fukuoka in the distance. I basically kind of knew where I was going. And what was cool is once I finally found a more major road and kind of was more in civilization, and I found a family mart, and I got on a little map, and I was like, okay, here's where I am. Here's the direction I go to get back to my Airbnb. It's going to be, whatever, not that long of a walk, 40 minutes or something, no big deal. But the great thing is, there was this family mart that I found that was huge. It wasn't something I'd ever found in Tokyo. In Tokyo, all the convenience stores I found were pretty much just little small convenience stores. And even in Fukuoka, most of them were like that. But this one was like, not quite as big as a grocery store, but it was kind of like a shopper's drug mart. It was quite large, and it was just so cool to go in there because I was also starving to death. And I bought so much stuff. I just got so much stuff. I got like a ramen and some hard-boiled eggs and a chicken breast. I was going to put those all together. Got a bunch of just candy and junk food and some drinks, some cold coffee and stuff. And the sandwiches in Japan, they always cut the crusts off, and I'm not sure why. I really like crust, but I got all this stuff and went and paid for it and just sat there because it had a pretty big seating area. But this was kind of getting a little bit on in the night and just kind of an obscure, weird area. There was nobody else there. Like, the Tokyo convenience stores were always more busy. The first time I figured out that convenience stores in Japan have like hot water you can use to make your noodles right there was in like Shibuya. It was so busy and so crowded. Where this was just nice and empty, no one around, a few little customers, but I was just at the counter all by myself, just packing in all this food, just eating like a disgusting amount. But it was just such a good feeling, like to go on this big long hike and to have, again, like discovered this thing. Because I just get off on that so much. I love it, of just like, I want to figure that mountain out. And I figured it out. I at least, there was more still to do, but I cracked the first bit. And just that sense of accomplishment, a sense of mental accomplishment, the sense of physical accomplishment for doing the big hike. It never feels better to fucking cram a bunch of convenience store food in your face than then. And then, walked back to the Airbnb, took a couple of days off from mountaineering from there. All right, so my fingers are starting to freeze off my body, so let's take another break there, because I got more adventures on that mountain to talk about. Coming up right now. All right, last time I recorded, it was the middle of winter, and yeah, it was all dark, and I remember I was talking about the creepy ghost lights of cyclists going by. It felt like everything was just so still and cold and calm. It felt like a little diorama I was inside of. But now, fast forward 6 months, I've been, working on other stuff. I kind of put this episode on the back burner, so now it's summer. And today in particular, it's pretty cloudy, but super hot. So it makes these woods, it's like I'm in the shower. It's so humid, like I just got out of the shower, but it's everywhere. It's just like, whoa. But this actually reminds me a lot of being in Japan, particularly Fukuoka, because Fukuoka is in the south of Japan, and I was there in the middle of summer. Part of what made it so great wasn't just that this mountain I'm talking about was this beautiful mountain walk, it's just that it was blazing hot summertime, which, there's downsides to that, but there's upsides too. It's kind of nice to just be so hot that it just fries your brain. But yeah, now that I'm in those conditions, I figured let's just finish this little story because, again, really it is just these different mountain paths that I found on this little walk. So last time I made my way up this path. I found the path into the woods and I was not at all prepared and I had no liquids, and I did the long winding route down the paved road all the way down the mountain. So the next time I brought some water. I could never quite get my water level exactly perfect because just a bottle of water wasn't quite enough. 2 bottles was actually pretty good because I usually drink like a bottle and a half. It's just a little tougher to carry, to juggle around 2 bottles. One time from the 7-Eleven I bought this, I don't know if it was a whole gallon because they don't use gallons, whatever the milliliters are. It was big though. Great big thing of water, and that was a little much. It was really heavy and I didn't drink it all. But I never went up there without liquids again, because that was silly. But this time I went up that initial pathway that was just kind of eroded into the side of the mountain. And I can't remember if I mentioned him last time, but I'd run into people up there once in a while. And in particular, there was this guy with his dog who I saw twice. So he must go up there like every day just to walk his dog. And I thought, man, that is awesome. Like that's what I would like to do when I'm like retirement age or something. It would be so cool. Like the way my Airbnb was so close to the start of this mountain path, I could get there in 10 minutes or whatever. I just think that'd be really cool to just every day, just to keep you active, just to give you something to do. It reminds me of my friend Matt had an extreme version of this idea of like, what if every year you had to do a giant hike? And then if you don't make it, you don't make it. And that's how old people die. They don't just die of old age, they die of the hike, but it gives you something to work toward all year. You got to prepare for the hike. You got to keep up your physical activity. You got to be ready. And I was like, I actually kind of like that idea. That's pretty cool. I would kind of like to do a lesser version of that, a less death-centric version, but just to keep you kind of active and engaged with physicality when you're older. It'd be nice to have a mountain like this nearby. So I may have seen that guy this time, I'm not sure. I don't remember the specific days I saw him. But I went up that first part of the path, which takes 35, 40 minutes, something like that. And then when I got up there, I got to the road, the paved road, and it's like, okay, so I know that's not the way. I mean, it was all right. Some of the views were kind of cool and stuff. But that's not what I'm trying to get to. Because I looked on Google Maps and I'm just like, what is this place? Is there anything notable about this place? And the main thing is that it's a little tough to read because once you get into mountains, it's just kind of a blank spot on the map, It's not easy to follow. Mountain paths and stuff aren't really on Google Maps. But I saw that there was an observation deck and it was listed as one of these like potential things to do in Fukuoka, like semi-famous in that town. And it seemed to be very near where I was going. It's called the Aburayama Katai observation deck. So I went back up, and there was a sign that I'd noticed the first time that had, an alternate side path that kept going further up the mountain. So I was like, all right, let's try that. So I went up the side path, and it pretty quickly branched again to the left and to the right. So I knew the observation deck was to the left somewhere. So I'm like, all right, let's just take the left route. And it kind of went in this sort of gradual circle. It circled around, and just beautiful. Just walking through these woods, unbelievably great. And like the paths in Japan, there's a lot of paths in this little woods I'm in here now and stuff, but not like in Japan. In Japan, it's like people use them a lot. And they tend to be really well maintained. And in particular, I remember at this part, there were like a series of steps someone had made by just taking little, I guess they like took trees and cut them into logs and arranged the logs to make steps for like a really long way down. It must have taken ages, it's just tons of work. But you see that all the time in Japan, and it's just like, wow, this is cool. And I remember in particular going down that particular part, there was a guy who came up to pass by me. And it's one of those things where, all we did was the little head nod, and they're just like, hey, how you doing? Even though it was just that little moment and we didn't speak and we didn't really communicate at all besides that, I could just feel so clearly like we were just like emanating that message, or like radiating that message to each other of just like, isn't this cool? Isn't this awesome? Like, to be like a big nature douchebag. It was just kind of like, aren't we rad? Look where we are. Look at this. He was a Japanese guy. He wasn't another, tourist, but there was still that feeling of like, hey, not everybody's here, Most people are not here, but we are. We're doing the mountain hike. We're doing the nature hike. Look at this beautiful place. There's no one here. But we're soaking it in. It's just my imagination of what message was passing between us. But that's what I felt, and I just had a feeling he did too. Or at the very least, there was just some kind of acknowledgement, some unspoken acknowledgement that this was a fucking beautiful place. And as I went further down that little walkway, it flattened out into a shrine area, and those are all over the place in Japan too, and it's just really neat. Because religious stuff in Japan is so light, it's so low key. It's weird. It's like they have little religious ceremonies, and when you get to the shrine, things you're supposed to do and things you're supposed to say. But there's not a lot of weight behind it, it's just kind of tradition for the sake of tradition, or just, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. I don't really understand it, but it's not like our really heavy like Christian stuff or Catholic stuff or Jewish stuff where it's like, this is serious, man. This is about God, and this is about eternity and all this fucking horse shit. In Japan, it doesn't seem to be about anything. It's just kind of neat. It's just a neat, cool thing. And I remember, I don't know why, no one was around. This is not something I normally do, but I kind of was like, I should just kneel at this altar. But it was stone. This one was all made of stone, and it really hurt my knees. So I was like, okay, never mind. That's the extent of my religious observances. So I kept following the path down, and eventually it connected to a paved road. A road that went up the hill and down the hill. And I was like, just at this point, I had no sense of where I was or where anything might be in relation to where I was. So I decided not to go up the hill because it seemed counterproductive, counterintuitive. I had just gone up the hill and back down. Now to go back up again would just be weird. So I decided I would just go down the hill, and that would basically be it for that day. But it was handy because right across from there was a public washroom. It's one thing I love about Japan. There's a lot of public washrooms. And because the weather is milder in general, they tend to just be open, where we don't have as many public washrooms in Canada, and then of course in the winter they're all closed down. Japan, they're just there if you need them. And it had a couple nice little drink machines next to it. So I'm like, perfect. Buy a couple drinks, go take a pee. And I don't think I needed to use the washroom that day, but that washroom I ended up passing by it many times. So eventually it was time to do more than take a pee. And it did have the dreaded squat toilet, where if you've seen any stuff about Asia in general, you've probably seen these squat toilets. And I was always so curious about them because I was like, I just didn't quite understand how they worked. It's like, okay, you got this porcelain kind of hole in the floor. I mean, I guess it seems obvious, but things sink in a lot better for me when I'm actually experiencing them instead of just watching them on a YouTube video. And what I learned about the squat toilets, I didn't mind them nearly as much as other people do. But I'm just also not a person who, I'm not a fan of like, I'll just hold it. It's like, nah, if I have the opportunity to use the washroom and I need to use the washroom, I'm gonna fucking do it. And the squat toilets I definitely found a little weird because a lot of stuff, a lot of times in Japan I'd notice like little details about just how things work, how appliances work or how stuff in the apartment work, just little, even just like unwrapping food from the convenience store. A lot of stuff is just designed in ways that just make sense in little ways that we just didn't seem to think about in North America. So I assumed maybe the squat toilet was a similar thing. Like maybe there's something to this that I'm not getting. Because they do have bidets on their sit-down toilets sometimes, and I think that's great. That's another thing that I was like, I need to try this for myself to really understand. And then I tried it and I'm like, yeah, makes sense to me. I don't know why we don't do this. Whereas the squat toilet, what I don't get about it is it doesn't seem particularly simpler than a sit-down toilet. It's just the wrong shape. Like it still needs water to flush it out. It still needs all the same mechanisms as a sit-down toilet. It's just not shaped in a way that's convenient to sit. Maybe it uses less water than filling up a toilet bowl, but I don't know, because to make sure that everything is cleaned up after you're done, it takes quite a bit of water. If it saves any, it's not much. It's not worth it. Mainly what I learned is if you ever need to use a squat toilet, make sure you pull your pants down past your knees, because otherwise when you squat down, if your pants are above your knees, when you squat, it'll turn your pockets upside down and your stuff might fall out. Luckily, I avoided having any of my stuff fall in a toilet. But that was definitely a little trial and error thing. And then what I noticed other than that is just that despite all this hiking up mountains and shit, I'm not as in good shape as I wish I was, because it's really hard on the legs. It's really tough on your thighs to squat. And yeah, like I said, you still need to flush it. You still need the toilet paper. You still need all the stuff. I just don't really get it. It's just a toilet in an inconvenient shape. Not a great fan of those, but I don't hate it like other people. I'll take it, It's better than nothing. But they didn't really show up that much. I think they're falling out of favor in Japan, and that's cool with me. But yeah, I just walked down the street, back down what was left of the mountain, and then I was just in one of these kind of generic random neighborhoods where it's just like nice little 1 or 2 story houses, little like rain gutters and irrigation ditches and stuff everywhere, occasional little rice paddies and stuff. Like it was mostly a residential neighborhood, but still some feeling of the countryside a little bit. And then I just sort of walked through that, walked for 40 minutes, occasionally here's a park. Oh, there's a 7-Eleven. Eventually I got to the overpass, the big overhead highway that I knew if I followed that, it would eventually get me back to my Airbnb. It was a fairly long walk to get back, but just like an all right little walk through a Japanese neighborhood. And that was attempt number 2. So I'm like, all right, that was pretty cool. That was fun. That was a nice walk, but I actually never ended up taking that walk in particular again. Because I was like, all right, where's the observation deck? How did I miss that? So that will be the next leg of my journey. All right, I keep taking little breaks in between recording segments of this. This time I'm walking up a hill, sort of like I was doing in Japan. It's less hot today. And yeah, I can hear some traffic in the distance. That was one thing that was kind of weird in Fukuoka, is this mountain was further away from civilization than these woods I'm in now. But it's amazing how much sound travels just through the open air. Like there'd be times on that mountain where there'd be a break in the trees and I could look out and see, like, way in the distance, there's all the little teeny cars driving in the expressway way in the distance. But you could still hear stuff, especially like if a siren or something went off. It's like, wow, that does not seem far. I wonder too, I wonder what's happening with Airbnb after all this time with COVID, of everything being shut down. Airbnb was pretty tenuous in Japan anyway. There's a lot of regulations and stuff. I wonder how many places are still gonna be doing Airbnb stuff. Like that apartment by Akigawa Station that I talked about before. I wonder if that's still gonna be a listing that's available. This place in Fukuoka. It would be great if it was available because it's so perfect that it's right by this mountain. But if I can't stay there, it's going to be different. Instead of getting up in the morning and going to the local 7-Eleven and going up the mountain, I'm going to have to get on the subway and ride out to there, out to Umebayashi Station, so I can hike up this mountain. It's going to be a lot different the second time. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. I mean, COVID's been going on so long. I might have been to Japan and back a couple of times by now. I just feel like it's going to be in my rotation now that I've been there once. But as soon as I went the first time, the whole world shut down. Anyway, this epic day of traveling, when I went back up the mountain, it's like, okay, I understand a lot better what's going on up there. I understand that there are these like side paths in the mountains and that I don't just have to follow the paved path. So I took that cool side route around to the shrine and then to the road, and then I followed the road down. So I was looking on Google Maps and just trying to figure out, like, it's a little hard because it's so abstract. I'm like looking at this Google map of the mountain and I figured out like roughly where I had been. But again, the mountain is just kind of a big green blob. Paths and stuff are not labeled. But I knew. I looked up this observation deck. I looked up videos of it, the Aburayama Katai observation deck. And it's like, I know it's there. I know it's there. I know I was close. I just got to go back up and try again and just look closer and figure out what's going on. So a nice sunny, hot day. Went to the 7-Eleven, bought some water. And that initial approach to the mountain, I can't remember exactly how that evolved, because I remember like that first stairway that I found. I had to go up through a little neighborhood, through this little apartment block, and to the stairs, but I noticed that the stairs, after you climbed up them, another set of stairs went down on the other side. So I managed to find where that other side originated, but I had to kind of cut through an abandoned lot and over a little stream that someone had made, like a makeshift little bridge through some tall grass to get to those stairs, but they were technically closer. They were the closer side to me. Oh, there's a raccoon. Hey, buddy. But yeah, I eventually streamlined that process, but I'm still having medium problems getting to the stairs to start the journey. Then went all the way up the stairs. And I don't know if it was that day, but I definitely, one of these trips, I stopped at the top of those stairs because there's little benches before you get onto the mountain proper. And just going up the stairs tired me out like crazy, because it's just like insane how many stairs there were, just endless stairs. And yeah, you don't get that fun of hiking through nature, and you don't get the gradual rise and fall of going up the mountain. It's just stairs straight up. It's brutal. So I was just sitting at the top of those stairs, and there was an older Japanese guy and his wife who saw me sitting there, and I guess just didn't assume that I was completely out of shape. They assumed I was sitting there for some purpose. So they said something to me, the guy said something to me, and it's that moment where it's like you're falling. It's like I can understand why Japanese people are kind of shy to talk, because they're not sure about their English. I feel the same way when I'm in Montreal. I went to French school as a kid. I'm pretty bilingual. But what if you mess up, you know? What if it goes wrong? It's just easier not to try. And I had that little moment where the guy said something I didn't clock it at all. I just had no idea what he said. But you can get away with one. You can just pretend you didn't really hear him. It's like, sorry, what was that? And then the second time I didn't get it either. And it's like, uh-oh, now we're in danger zone. What do I do now? Pretty soon this exchange is just going to completely fall apart. You get the feels bad of just like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying. Which must be frustrating if you've been trying to learn English and you know the words, and it's like, why can't people understand me? You know? But sometimes like just pronunciations just really are weird. It's like when you see, the classic example I always think of is like baseball, but their word is besuboru, which, you know, if you see it written down, besuboru, it's like, oh, baseball, okay. But when you hear someone say besuboru, nothing in your mind thinks baseball. It doesn't even sound remotely similar, you know? So it's very easy for things to just not click in your brain. And this only took a moment, but it feels like an eternity where my brain is just like, come on, brain, click, 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 tumble, tumble, tumble. Let's get these tumblers falling in place. Let's unlock this. And I realized he asked if I was bird watching. And it's like, oh, nice, I figured it out. And I said, oh, no, I'm just resting. I'm just tired, but I'm going to the observation deck. And he's like, oh, you know, yeah, of course, the observation deck. I think it's probably not a common route I was taking to get to the observation deck, but it's obviously the most famous landmark around those parts. So he's like, oh yeah, okay, cool, well, hey, have fun. But yeah, after my little rest, started hiking up the mountain. On the one side, I could see the cool view of my Airbnb, and a little further on the other side, just the view of Fukuoka proper, the city in the distance, like I was saying, the surprisingly loud traffic. I never saw a lot of animals up there until later at night, but a lot of insects. Like there's one part in particular where it's like some kind of crazy spider mound. Just as you're going up, there's this part where there's all these big spiders. Like by big, I mean like, I don't know, a couple inches wide. Not really that big, but big enough, not tiny. And they're just like everywhere. It's like, oh shit. But yeah, this time I got up to the top. I got to where the little ribbons were tied to the trees. I got to where the paved road started. So it's like, okay, there's the paved road that I took the first time. A little ways ahead of me, there's that side path I took the second time that took me to the shrine. These aren't right. What am I missing? So I searched around more, and it's right at the very start, right before the paved road starts. It's so easy to miss because it's really overgrown. It's easier if you're coming back the other way. Like I had to pass it, and then on the way back I could see the little trodden down part in the grass that led over to the side. And there was one of those little arrow direction signs with some words I couldn't read, but the numbers were very small. It was only going to be a few minutes to walk down it. And I was like, all right, this seems good. This seems like something. This has got to be it. And it was really nice. It's like really, it's like in this wooded canopy next to a stream. And there's this big, it's like a big old dam or something that just obviously hadn't been used in forever, all covered over in moss. And I walked down this thing and I'm like, man, this has got to be going somewhere. This is awesome. And then I could see a little break in the trees. And the key was, when I looked up this observation deck on YouTube, the main thing that stood out to me is that there was a drink machine there. And I'm like, awesome. Even on the mountain, there's a drink machine. And there's a hot dog vendor, just a guy who sells hot dogs. And I thought I could see way down at the end of the trees, like the opening, the sunny opening in the trees. And I'm like, that looks like the hot dog thing. I think I did it. I think I made it. And then as I got closer, this wasn't common. This really only happened this one day. But it's funny that it was the first time I was there. Tons of motorbike people. Like, Japanese people are still way more into smoking than we are. I guess it's been declining a lot, but relative to North America, they're all about smoking. So it's just all these motorcycle people just hanging out with their motorbikes, smoking, looking cool. And I was like, this fucking rules. This is so fucking awesome. And I broke through the tree line and I saw the little fucking hot dog guy. It was actually closed. The hot dog thing wasn't open that day. But it was the hot dog thing, and there was the vending machine. And then when I turned my head left, there it was. Boom, the observation deck view, just the view of Fukuoka. And this is where I should say, if you want to see what this stuff looked like, I made a YouTube video where I chronicled this journey of how to get to the observation deck. So if you just go on YouTube and search how to hike to the Aburayama Katae, Katae observation deck, and you can see what all this stuff looks like for reals. And there were some touristy folks there, you know, taking in the view. You really could see the whole town. Like, I think the most famous landmark in Fukuoka proper is probably Fukuoka Tower. It was over on the left, a little hard to see. It kind of peeked out around the edge of the mountain. Then you could see the whole town, and then on the other side of town is the airport, and you could see the airport, and it's like, wow, there it is. There's the whole place. And it just felt so cool because, like, I figured it out, you know? It took a bunch of tries. I was just exploring, just going random places. I just saw the mountain. And it was like, I gotta go up that mountain. And what a cool payoff, you know? I mean, generally walking in the mountains is pretty fun anyway. But it's not usual to find like a famous local landmark or this amazing, beautiful view or this cool thing people have heard of, you know? If you know about Fukuoka, you know about this place. I didn't expect to have anything concrete like this, like something I could pinpoint. Because it's hard to talk about. I've had so many like just weird exploratory journeys, but I don't know how to describe them because it's just like, yeah, I was just at a place, you know? I was just on a mountain or in some woods. It was pretty cool. But then to have that distinct place, the Aburayama Katae observation deck, it's like, yeah, I went there. But I didn't go there by the road, the paved road that goes up there that the cool motorbike guys take. I found this weird path through the mountains from Umabayashi Station. Like, I feel like I found my own thing, you know? Like, I bumped into the occasional random Japanese local on the mountain. But this is certainly not what tourists do, you know? I feel like I found my own fucking journey, my own little path, my own little weird pilgrimage. It was just so cool. And then I started walking, you know, after I soaked it in for a while. Instead of going back the way I came, it's like, okay, let's explore down this road. So I started walking down the paved road, and there's no sidewalk. There's a lot of places in Japan with no sidewalk. But you had to be really careful to stay to the side so traffic wouldn't hit you. There wasn't a lot of traffic, but some. And the sheer mountains on one side and then the mountains or the drop off on the other side and all the guardrails, it reminded me so much of Initial D. I've never seen the anime, but I read the manga. And it's all about racing in the mountains of Japan. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't take place there. It takes place in a different prefecture. But it looks just like that. I'm like, this is so fucking cool. It's like I'm in fucking Initial D. Like, this is where it really felt different from Tokyo. Made me really glad that I went to this other city. I got to see this other side of Japan because Tokyo is cool, but there's really no mountains. It's very flat. Whereas everywhere else in Japan, it seems like there's tons of mountains. And it's a shame not to have the mountains. So yeah, this was awesome. And then I went down the road, and there was a break in the guardrail and a walking path that went down the mountain. And that was where I sort of clued in that I found a guy on Google Maps. If you go on Google Maps and look up the observation deck, somebody left a comment of how to get there. And it was quite complicated and confusing. It's like, okay, take this bus and get off at this place and walk through the little rice fields and stuff and through the neighborhood to this path that goes up to the observation deck. And I realized I was at the other end of that. This was the path that guy was talking about, but that was like way beyond my abilities. It was way too complicated. Japanese names and stuff. I would have needed a phone with Wi-Fi and translation stuff to figure out the buses and whatever. I came in the back way. I came in the reverse way. So I saw that path and I'm like, okay, I'm going to check that out. But first, this paved road seems suspiciously similar to the road I came out on when I went to that shrine. So I kept walking down the road for a bit, and I found a French restaurant, Au Bout du Monde. And I was like, whoa, there's a restaurant up here? What the fuck? I looked that up later, and yeah, it's this fancy pants French restaurant. I kind of wanted to go just because it's like so cool. Like, man, up on the mountain, not only is there a hot dog guy and a fucking drink machine, halfway up the mountain is a fucking French restaurant with this beautiful view. I bet that's amazing. But I looked it up and it's really expensive. Like, you know, of course there's like $80. And I was like, no. I want to buy onigiri from fucking 7-Eleven. I'm not down for that. But I walked down a little further and there was the washroom with the squat toilet from before. And I'm like, sweet. Like, it all connected in my brain. That loop I had taken looped me right around the observation deck and to a lower point on this road. So if I'd gone up the road, I would have gotten to the observation deck. And my little mental map was like all colored in, like fucking awesome. That's so cool. But then again, to just add to the mental map, I went back up to that opening in the guardrail, walked down the walking path. That was a pretty long walk because it's all the way down the mountain. But this time it was a paved path, gently curving left and right to get you to the bottom. And it was pretty nice. But I really think my walk was way cooler because it's through the actual woods instead of just a paved walking path up. And ironically, mine was easier to get to because my path was so close to Umebayashi Station. Where this one, like I said, it's kind of, well, it's the same thing as when I walked down the road before, but it still just spits you out in random little neighborhood, random little schools and playgrounds and houses and irrigation ditches and rice fields, and you just walk through them for a while until you finally get to, you know, the overpass is the easiest way to reorient yourself, and then you can follow that back to the origin spot. So that was pretty rad. I was pretty pleased with that. And for a little while, I would just go to the observation deck, and that would be my little walk for the day. But eventually, you know, I started thinking like, okay, what about that side path I took that looped me around to the shrine? That was pretty nice, but it looped to the left and took me back to the road. But there was another route to the right that just kept going up and up and up, way further. I considered myself at the top of the mountain. I mean, I was at the observation deck. But if you go deeper into the mountain, it keeps going up. I was like, what, pray tell, might be up there? It must go somewhere. It's a path. It's got a little wooden sign, a little arrow pointing up there. It's got little wooden steps built into the mountain. What if I were to just buy a huge amount of water, one of the great big like gallon jugs, and a bunch of provisions, and what if I just walk right into the fucking mountain? What would happen then? And when I next record, I'll tell you what happened then, because it was fucking cool. Test. Okay, good. Test. Just a little interstitial. I mean, this whole episode's kind of a weird, I don't even know what this is. Just my memories of a mountain. Memories of a hike. But yeah, when I went to Japan, I had heard that they had a lot of Airbnb problems. Like, at first, Airbnb was just a thing, and then it started getting clamped down on. And a lot of Airbnbs closed, and there's a lot more hoops to jump through. And then by the time I went, it seemed like things had settled a bit. Like, I did have to do stuff there that I never had to do anywhere else. Like, I had to send them like a picture of my passport, just different documents and stuff, I guess, just to kind of prove I was a legitimate traveler. And it seems like Japan kind of does that in a bunch of weird little ways. Like, it's hard to get Google Maps there. Like, you can't really download Google Maps because, I don't know, maybe it competes with something they have. Or like Uber versus taxis. They're really trying to hold on to the old style of stuff. So with Airbnb, it's like I think they would just prefer everybody use a hotel or something. So they made it a little tough, a little more tough than usual for Airbnb runners. But I was just listening to a podcast that apparently there's been like another clampdown around the time of the Olympics. There was really pushing stuff, like places really needed to conform to hotel rules in the sense of like fire exits and, like lit up. Like, you need to have those lights along the ground leading to an exit, just all this kind of stuff that a hotel would have. But if you're an Airbnb person just renting out a normal property, just your normal house, you're not going to have these things. And it just kind of bummed me out a little because basically what I want to do when I get back to Japan, I really kind of just want to do the same loop again if I could. Where I started in Tokyo near Ikebukuro. And that place, it basically was a dedicated dorm style kind of hostel style hotel type place. So even if they're not on Airbnb specifically, there's a good chance I can probably track that place down. I'm sure it'll still be running in some capacity. I just have to figure out how to book it. The last place I stayed, I don't know, maybe. It was like an apartment complex out in the Akigawa Valley like I talked about, combined with a taxi dispatch. I feel like that place at this point has probably just been converted into a normal apartment. I mean, from COVID alone. I just doubt that they, stuck it out. But that one, it's like, that's okay. Like, what was neat about that place was not as much the place specifically as just that it was on the outskirts of Tokyo. It was kind of neat. If I go to different outskirts, I'll probably have a very similar and maybe better experience. Like, it's probably better to shake things up a little, not to just do everything the same. I would if I could. If I could, I would just do the same loop that I've done and that I already know how it all works. And then on the third trip, I'd start getting weird. But by necessity, things are going to start getting different, and that's fine. It's probably better. But when I heard this news about the extra Airbnb regulations, it really kind of bummed me out about this one leg of the trip, the middle leg, the Fukuoka leg. Because this place that I've been staying while I've been doing these little hikes up this mountain was so beautiful, was so great, so amazing. And for my purposes, amazing. Like, it was weird. I met up with my friend Brad out there one time just to show him this hike. And we were waiting for a third friend of ours, and he's like, all right, where should we go wait? And I was like, nowhere. Like, let's just wait at the station because there's nothing here. There's not even a coffee shop. Like, in that sense, it's such a residential neighborhood that I guess it's not necessarily that appealing even. There's nothing there. But if all you want is a super awesome Airbnb and a cool hike to an observatory, it's fucking perfect. It's so perfect. But it just made me a little sad to know that I probably won't be able to stay at that same place. I mean, again, COVID alone probably did it. That probably sealed that place's fate long ago, you know? Because, yeah, this place was definitely a family-run place. They obviously just owned this apartment complex. And I only met them at the very end, but as I was leaving, I met them. There was like a dad and his daughter, and the daughter could speak English and the dad couldn't. But I was just like happily telling them like, oh yeah, I had such a great time staying here, and like the mountains and the observation deck. What a great hike. Such a good time. And then I realized midway through, like, oh, the dad's just smiling politely. He doesn't know what I'm saying. But yeah, they just were so nice and were just like, hey, please come back, you know? Thanks for staying with us in that awesome Japanese politeness that as a Canadian just warms the cockles of my heart. But yeah, I'm sure with the tourist downtick from COVID and stuff, like that place has got to also just be an apartment at this point. And yeah, it just got me feeling a little teeny touch melancholy, because I mean, that was a pretty epic journey where I left from my hometown where I am now. I went to Montreal first, then I went to Amsterdam, then I went to Tokyo, then I went to Fukuoka, then back to Tokyo, then Vancouver, then Toronto, then finally back here. And of all those different places that I stayed, as far as the actual place, like that place in Fukuoka, head and shoulders my favorite, like the best. You know, when I'm kind of like wandering the streets in my memory of the different neighborhoods I liked and stuff, particularly in Japan, it's a pretty even race. Everywhere that I stayed was awesome in a different way. But as far as the actual place, like when I'm just kind of lying in bed and just imagining I'm in a different bed, in a different city, in a different place, just to help me fall asleep or whatever, it's pretty much always that Fukuoka apartment. I just loved it. It was so awesome. You know, despite the fact it was kind of hot, it didn't really have air conditioning. The frogs outside were so loud. You wouldn't believe it. Frogs versus cicadas battling. You know, the internet didn't work, but that's kind of an upside. There's nothing in that neighborhood, especially at night. Like, where are you going to go? You ain't going nowhere. But it's like I can't talk myself out of it. None of that stuff matters. That place was just great. It was just awesome. Just to get out of the subway and walk through the little neighborhood, and there's it's like a couple little spots, even just between the subway station and my place, where there were drink machines. And just seeing what drinks they had in them. So yeah, someday I'll eventually make it back to Fukuoka. Probably I'll have to stay somewhere else. It'll be a little different. And I'll walk by that apartment and someone else will be living there, and it'll just be like, I mean, I do that all the time. So many different cities and different old apartments where I'll walk by and just be like, I wonder who lives there now. There's that place that I used to live at. Maybe I lived there for a year. Maybe, like in this case, I only lived there for 3 weeks. But it still kind of just feels like your house. It's like, I miss that. I miss my old house. My temporary fake house. All right, here's the grand finale of Keith Walks Up a Mountain. So I was doing this just, during these COVID-y times, stuck in my hometown. You know, it's just nice to remember traveling. You know, that's the whole reason I did this podcast. This particular episode is just a nice way to remember a cool trip I took to Fukuoka and this cool mountain that I liked. You know, helps get my mind off being trapped in my hometown. But since I was just doing this on the side and just every once in a while I just do a new little segment, I inadvertently managed to hit every season because that last one, that was the summer one, and now it's fall. Although I just missed the perfect brand new fall. Like when fall first happens in Atlantic Canada, it's super beautiful. All the leaves change color. It's like a picture book. But we've passed a little bit beyond that where cold snaps have started hitting. And I'm pretty sure last night, it was like raining a little. And it was dark out, so it was hard to say for sure. But like looking out my window at like a street light, I'm like, I think that's snow. I think that rain has turned into snow. But none of it stayed on the ground. There's none there right now. And you know, it's not so bad being home. I mean, I'm in the woods right now, tromping through the woods. This is pretty nice. This is pretty pleasant. But yeah, there's just something about, man, traveling. Dude, fucking Corona. Fuck shit up so bad. Because, yeah, I don't know, even though my day-to-day maybe wasn't that different, you know? Like, waking up in my little Airbnb, going to a Japanese convenience store, and then walking up the Aburayama mountain. Maybe that's not so different from, you know, waking up here, going to a Tim Hortons, and then walking through these woods, you know? This ain't so bad, but there is just something about just being in a different place. It makes even just your kind of normal day-to-day, it just feels more exciting. It feels a lot more, well, just that cartographer part of my brain feels a lot more excited. Oh, can you hear that? It was windy as fuck on the way here. It was like unpleasantly windy. Now that I'm in the trees, it's not so bad, but I could just hear the wind blowing by overhead. Luckily, I'm protected while I'm in here. But yeah, talk about first world problems, right? Like, oh, I gotta walk through the Canadian beautiful woods instead of the Japanese beautiful woods. Oh, woe is me. But yeah, it's just fun. It's just fun to think back to fun travel stuff. So let's wrap it up with my final, most epic journey up the mountain. So I'd managed to find the path to the mountain. Then I managed to find my way to the observation deck, and along the way found some cool little shrines and stuff. This time I decided at the turnoff, at the main sort of crossroads where you can either go down the long road that I went down the first time, or directly to the observation deck, or there was the third way that you start going further up the mountain. And I looped around to the left and took this long curving path that eventually got back to the observation deck. This time I decided let's start going further up the mountain, and let's just keep going up and let's see what happens. So I bought some water, I bought some supplies. I got to that area and I just started going up, just up and up and up. And at first it was pretty similar to pretty much most of the time you're on that mountain, where you don't really feel like you're on a mountain. Because it's so forested, it just feels like a path through the woods. You're just kind of gradually moving upward and moving upward. But then there'd be those occasional breaks in the trees where you could see out across the city proper. And it's like shocking to see, like, holy fuck, I am so high up. This is crazy. I am so fucking high up. I got up to, I think this is the peak of that day. Maybe not the peak of the whole mountain, but the highest I ever got. I definitely got to a distinct peak that had kind of a bunch of signs I couldn't read, and a distinct kind of hangout spot, you know, where you can just sort of chill out. But there was this one part where there was a big boulder that kind of went out over the edge of the cliff of where I was at. And there were all these signs that, with little cartoon pictograms and stuff to make sure even illiterate fools like me could understand what it was trying to say, which was don't go out onto this thing. Do not. Because it would be an amazing photo, but it's so dangerous. And I creeped over just a little to see, like, so what is the deal here? And yeah, it's that this huge, enormous rock, this rock that was like 5 times bigger than me, is like jutting out and just over a sheer drop. It was the most sheer drop I saw in that mountain by a mile. The rest of the mountain was all a fairly gradual incline. But yeah, this was just, if you climbed out onto this rock, I mean, it seemed unlikely that the rock would come loose because it was enormous, but if you fell off this thing, like, yeah, you're dead. You're totally fucking dead. I was like, fuck. And even just being even remotely near that thing, scary. It's the only time up on that mountain that was like scary. I'm like, that's fucked up. Holy shit. So I backed away from that, but I did stay in that little area for a little while. Just sat on like a smaller rock somewhere and pulled out my phone and did some writing. Because, I always try to get in a little bit of fiction writing every day. And what better time than that? I was a little wiped out from walking up so high. And just how cool. It's just cool, That's like the platonic ideal of what being a writer is. It's like, yeah, I hiked up a mountain, I sat on a rock, and I wrote some shit. It's like, cool. But yeah, as I was sitting there, I remember a group of, they seemed like junior high students. Maybe they were a little older, but they were pretty young. And they all just kind of went by and, they came from the opposite direction as me. They were going back the way I came. And they just like, nodded hello. But yeah, I did my little writing. And I kept going along the ridge of the mountain. And it didn't really go higher from there. It sort of started to go down a little. But it really started getting more and more rugged. Like, I don't know where those kids came from, but I have a feeling I must have taken a different turn at some point than wherever they came from. Because the trail kept getting more and more indistinct. And then started to go distinctly down, but it got really tricky, where people had, previous people had attached ropes that you could use to hold on to as you went down, just to make sure that you didn't slip down this kind of rough-hewn, like, it wasn't this nice, pretty, cultivated, maintained steps like near the shrine I found earlier, where it was like these wooden steps that people had made. Here it was just like kind of whatever rocks and stumps and shit were around. They'd kind of arrange things to help you get down, but it was pretty steep and weird. And you had to hold on to these guide ropes. And that is where I started thinking more about like those old guys that I would pass with their dogs. Like, what if I fell down one of these or tumbled down into one of these valleys and broke my leg and my phone has no data? There's certainly no Wi-Fi signals around. Like, that's when it would be great to have a dog with you. I don't know. Well, I guess, I don't know, you'd have to have a super genius dog, I guess, to have the wherewithal to go get help for you. Maybe having a dog wouldn't really help. But I guess I was getting deep enough into the woods and it was getting creepy enough that all these thoughts of falling and hurting yourself, and like, it was all starting to encroach a little, where it is like, all right, I'm clearly just walking through the woods at this point. I really don't know where I am. I should probably be trying to bring this particular trek in for a landing. I've been walking for a couple hours. And then I got to this other crossroads where there were signs, but at this point, like, the signs are really small and weathered and weird, and just clearly some signs just some randoms had made. Not like the official signs that at least have some English and, official elevation numbers and stuff. But yeah, it was weird because it's like, okay, I'm looking back to where I came from and like, okay, there's some level of a path. To the right and left, there's little arrows, but I don't see anything. I tried just going forward. Let's just keep going forward and see what happens. And there was just nothing. And like, my idea of what a path in the woods is, like, to me, if there's even like a crease, in in the undergrowth where somebody walked at some point, you know, just any sign at all that someone had been through here. To me, that's a path. I'm like, okay, let's follow that. Let's see what happens. I have virtually anything counts as a path to me. But in this case, even with that like hypersensitive, anything can be a path, I couldn't see a path. I'm like, I just don't see anything. I don't know what's going on here. This is where I should have a fucking compass or something. Like I'm literally just walking through the woods at this point. What the fuck's going on? You know? There was probably a better, more curated path at some point, but I missed it. I just took a wrong turn. Which again, this is one of those things, like if I lived there, I was only in Fukuoka for like 3 weeks. But yeah, I feel like I could walk that mountain for fucking ever and just keep going different places and trying different stuff. It would be so great. But in this case, I realized like, okay, I should just try to get out of here. So I went back to that crossroads and it's like, okay, I could just go back exactly the way I came, go back up the mountain. But instead I used what little mountaineering knowledge I have, which literally is just from reading Hatchet and Lost in the Barrens. I don't know if I ever read my side of the mountain. I meant to. But just like the basic shit you learn from those of like, if you're lost in the woods, if you can find water, you know, follow the water, because water runs downhill, you'll eventually get to somewhere and it'll keep you from walking in circles, you know. Follow the water. You can't go wrong with that. So at that crossroads, even though every direction seemed to be nothing, there was one that was distinctly more downhill. So I started walking down that. And it was a little steep and a little tricky. And I could see down there what looked like kind of a little ravine. And when I got to it, it was, yeah, like I bet during rainy season and stuff, it's probably like a legitimate stream. At this point, this hot summer, it was almost dry. And this was all so underdeveloped and just so fucking nothing that it was hard to walk along the edges of this thing because there was just no path. Everything was just trees and clumps of woods and very difficult. But luckily, since this thing was mainly dry, I pretty much just walked right down the stream, you know, just avoiding whatever parts were still wet. Trying not to slip on rocks and things. So I awkwardly followed this mostly dry stream down the mountain and down the mountain and down the mountain, and it was tough enough and awkward enough and just not what I expected to happen. It's like, man, you know, I start having these thoughts like, did I really fuck up today? How did I get to this? I don't even know where I'm going to. I mean, at least I'm going down the mountain. I am following the trail of where water flows. So like they say in Hatchet, you know, it's got to get me somewhere. But at this point, it's like, man, even if I try to just turn around and go back the way I came, how easy is that going to be? Am I really fucking up? Like, it was still like maybe mid-afternoon at this point. I wasn't really worried about it getting dark anytime soon. But I was starting to get a little concerned of like, I'm really not at all trained or prepared for any of this. I just have some bullshit I bought from 7-Eleven. You know, this is pretty fucking stupid. But then it's always like, it's so cool when you have just these times of doubt and then something awesome happens to just flip it around where you're just like, oh man, this is great. I'm glad I did this. Where in this case, I kept going down the hill and I managed to carefully wind my way through this weird terrain. And then at that point when I'm just the most in the middle of nowhere I have ever fucking been in my time in Japan, where you don't expect anyone to be around or any signs of civilization. I haven't seen anything remotely inviting or what's the word, like the last sign of civilization I saw were those little signs at the crossroads that led to nowhere. And then I scrambled down one more hill and I found a shrine. Like, Japan is full of shrines. There's shrines everywhere. It's so cool. And like, what could be more awesome than this? Like, this was like my perfect version of religion, is this cool little shrine someone had made. That it was small, but it was still like really elaborate and neat, and it had like a little Buddha statue in it. And it was all made of wood, and it had like a little roof to protect it from rain. And there was like a little handmade wooden broom there. There were no people around, but you could just, if somebody wanted to sweep up the leaves and stuff, there's the cool little broom there. And it's just, man, yeah, that thing was just the best of just like, it's just there. It's just kind of communal. It's just understood that it's not going to be vandalized. It's not going to be destroyed. And in fact, here's the little broom, if you happen to be there and it needs to be swept up, go ahead and sweep it up. Some token coins left. Just a lot of stuff that, again, because of the weather, but also just culturally, Canada's not so bad, but if you just leave stuff like that, if I found something like that in these woods right now, it would be wrecked. It would be covered in beer cans and it would be destroyed, So yeah, I found the little shrine, and like, it's just neat. Shrines are everywhere. But this was the best shrine I found. Hands down. So cool. My favorite shrine. I bet I'll never be able to go back there. I'll probably never be able to find it again. But who knows, I don't know. Someday when I get to go back to Japan, I'm going to try. If they find my desiccated body in the woods, use this podcast as a... Oh, that's all he was trying to do. He was trying to find that dumb shrine. But yeah, with the shrine was also a little road. So it's like, oh, okay, whew. I'm in civilization again. I definitely made it. I'm safe. If following a stream is good, following a road is the best. A road is guaranteed to go somewhere. So I followed the little road, and it's kind of similar to the very first time I went up the mountain, and I just kind of came out. In that first case, it was like I walked down a road that was blocked at the end, and it's like I'm coming out of a weird spot. I remember some kids saw me and were like, where's that guy coming from? In this case, the road kind of took me to like, I definitely came out of like someone's property. It's like all of a sudden I'm in someone's backyard, and I just kind of have to go down their driveway and around their house. But nobody saw me, but that must have been weird too. Just like, why is this guy just coming out of the fucking, what the fuck? But the place I ended up, holy shit. I managed to look it up on a map later. It was called Sawara Ward. And it was so fucking beautiful. This is where I wish I could just, if there's any one part of this where I could just put my memory in your brain, this would be the point I would pick. Because obviously I just came down from the mountains. But on the other side were more mountains. This whole place was like maybe 2 miles across. Maybe, I don't know, I'm bad with distances like that. But it was basically in a bowl, surrounded by mountains on every side. And it's just like these small 1 or 2 story Japanese houses, rice fields, and just grass fields, and the big blue sky over top, and some just like perfect cartoon clouds, Simpsons clouds. And it's like I'm looking at a postcard, and it's just like, wow, where the fuck? How is this real life? How am I here right now? I guess that's the thing with like foreign traveling, is it really is, it's just so cool. Because yeah, maybe that day wasn't extremely different from this day. I woke up and now I'm walking through the woods. In that case, I walked through the woods longer. But there's that excitingness of you've never been here before, you don't quite know where you are. And then just the unexpectedness, seeing the shrine without expecting that. And yeah, this Sawara Ward place, it's like when you watch travel shows and you just see these like places that look too perfect, like they turned up the saturation, like the blue is too blue, the green is too green. But that's how this place really looked. And that it was all just contained in this perfect little bowl. I was just like, holy fuck, this fucking rules so goddamn much. What the fuck? But then I had the problem of, okay, I still don't know where I am. I still don't know where to go. I don't know how to get home. All the buildings near me seemed pretty residential. And there weren't really people around, but there was this road I had come out on was pretty busy. As idyllic and just like perfectly calm as this place seemed, this road I was on was definitely like the major artery. It was still only 2 lanes, but it was definitely, how far could I be from Fukuoka? I'd only been walking for the afternoon on foot. I was by car standards, very, very close. So this road clearly connected to Fukuoka. But which way, it's just left or right. And it's one of those things, once I figured it out, it seemed obvious. But my sense of direction is awful. It is just terrible. It's weird that I enjoy so much walking through random woods and things, because I never know where the fuck I am. And just because I don't know how to speak Japanese, and I'm like a weird loner anyway, a weird introvert, I really hesitated to talk to people in Japan unless I really had to, because everyone was very friendly and helpful, but sometimes it really would. I was surprised when I would just get fully stonewalled, There's like the people that they're a little shy about their English, but in reality their English is fine. But then there are people who really just can't speak English at all. It really does happen. Oh, look at me, Mr. Big fucking English guy. I can't believe it. I can't believe people don't speak my language. But I really didn't expect it. I don't know. And yeah, there weren't really people on foot walking around or anything. But it's like, if I had to, I guess I could go into one of these like little general stores or something and ask somebody, just Fukuoka, point me, please. But I didn't want to do that unless I was getting desperate, unless the sun was going down or something. So I basically just looked at the two directions and picked the prettiest one. So the one I picked was where the mountains on either side kind of converge, and I couldn't see where the road went. It just went into the distance and turned and disappeared between these mountains. And I started walking in that direction, and I don't know, I walked for probably 20 minutes, and just something, it took the whole 20 minutes for this to happen, but something inside me, it's like my ability to triangulate my location is so bad and so slow. It took a while before something inside me finally went, wait a sec, like just try to think this through. Like you've been walking through the woods all afternoon, going down different paths and going different ways, but if you think of the mountain as just the mountain, you started on one side of the mountain, you came off on the other side of the mountain. To circle back around that mountain, you shouldn't turn left like you just did. You should turn right and go back around the other way. And I still wasn't sure, I wasn't confident about it, but something in my subconscious was like, you have to be going the wrong way. Like you're just walking further away. So I turned around and walked the other way. And yeah, just walking past these like, I don't know, it's so neat in Japan where, the cities are so modern, but you don't have to go very far out of the cities. Like the edges of Fukuoka and Tokyo both really have that feeling of like anytime you see a country store or a sort of old style building, or like if you've ever seen the anime Non Biori, these like, it's just about these kids who live in the countryside. And you see the buildings that look like that. And it's like, this is so cool. These places fucking rule. Like it's just, the cities are nice, but it's those rural areas that I really liked better. So I was walking past those places, kind of keeping my eye open for a vending machine, but I didn't really come across any. And then I saw a sign, nice highway sign that's got, this way to go to wherever and turn this way, Fukuoka. I was like, awesome, all right. Lord knows how long this is going to take or where exactly I am. But if I just follow this path, this is going to get me back to Fukuoka. And it's just finally reaching that time of day when, it's not going to be dark soon, but the sun is definitely on the way down. So it's like, man, awesome. All of that weird fucking, this weird journey. This was by far my longest time on the mountain, my most lost on the mountain, but it all worked out. I got to see this weird, beautiful place, and now I was back on the track home. And as I walked down this little mini highway, like I was saying, the cities are really beautiful in their own way, and the countryside is so awesome and idyllic. But the way I was going, where my particular Airbnb was at Umebayashi Station, is actually kind of the awkward middle, where it's more of like the sort of like a factory type it's like a factory type neighborhood, but with no factories. Like all the buildings are still very small and stuff, but everything just felt kind of, I don't know, like what's a more nature-centered version of industrial, you know? Like a lot of work trucks and kind of garages and businesses like that. But still everything was like small, not like you think of industrial areas in North America. Still small buildings, still lots of open area, still lots of trees and grass and stuff. But yeah, in this case, walking along this pretty busy mini highway into the more industrial area, definitely not pretty like things had been. Not pretty like in the mountains, not pretty like Sawara Ward. But it was easily balanced out by the comfort, the comfort of knowing I was heading back home. And I eventually got to a 7-Eleven. It took a while. At this point, the sun is pretty distinctly going down. And just bought everything in the world. Like, all right, give me a sandwich, give me an onigiri, give me some candy, give me a chocolate bar, give me a couple cans of coffee, you know? How about I just eat everything in the world? Because I've been hiking all afternoon, bought all that stuff, kept walking, and I eventually got to the larger convenience store. The very first time I went on the mountain and I found this really big convenience store. I saw that. I saw it down the street. I'm like, oh fuck, there's that place. Like, amazing. Everything is tied up in a perfect little bow. But I took a turn off before then, now that I knew where I was, knew how to get home. And then the weird thing is, like, after that, it's a blank. Like, that day, I remember so clearly because it's all unique, weird stuff that I only ever did the one time. But as soon as I was back in my neighborhood that I'd been in all month, I don't remember any of that. I don't remember exactly what route I took to get home. I don't remember what I did once I got there. From that point on, it's just back in the hood. But yeah, if you've listened this whole way, thank you very much. Because, I don't know. It's just, this is very fun for me. Very interesting for me to just remember. Remember the journey. So for me, it's like really great because, you know, you can just visualize it all. You can visualize your own version of it. You know, it's probably relatively accurate. I mean, you know, woods, trees, dirt, grass, mountains, sky, clouds, you know. It's just the world. The world is the world. But that's the tale of Keith and the Mountain, where the whole thing was just so, like, unexpected on every level, where I didn't expect to go to Fukuoka, but Brad was there, so I went. I'd never heard of Fukuoka before. Now it's got a nice, rosy place in my heart. I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, Fukuoka. Whenever I get to go back to Japan, I gotta go back to Fukuoka too. Not just Tokyo. I just got a random Airbnb out on the outskirts. Definitely didn't expect that the main thing I'd be doing in Fukuoka was hiking up a mountain. And then that mountain itself just kept paying off, just kept being cooler and cooler. But yeah, I'm sure I must have said this earlier on, but I really feel like one of the things that mountain kind of planted in me, particularly seeing the old guys. I don't know, how many did I see? I'm not sure how many different people I saw, but there's one guy who I saw at least twice, so it was obvious that this is what he did every day. With his dog on the mountain, with these like ski pole type, you know, things to help him navigate the mountain. And he was pretty old, but he was doing great. And I was just thinking, like, that's what I want to do. When I eventually get to the point where I'm getting pretty old, like, I just got to set up shop somewhere close enough to a mountain hiking trail that I can go hike the mountain every day. Because, like, what a great way to just keep yourself mobile, keep yourself moving, keep yourself limber, keep yourself agile, keep yourself alive. Alive and enjoying the world. And I think the mountain part is important because, well, I guess that's one difference. Like, these woods I'm in now today, they're nice, but these particular woods are flat. And you do get a whole different level of workout when you go up. You know, it just makes the whole day it just pays off more. It's like afterward you really do feel like you accomplished something. Really wakes you up, really gets you involved in being alive. All right, this is rapidly getting pretentious at this point, so thank you for listening to me blab. Adios.
Do what you wanna do in the mountain. Good to get some inspiration, and there's no need for hesitation. Whoa, do what you wanna do in the mountain. Oh, in this rain, I sing along in free. In the mountain, I'm free. In the mountain, do what you gotta do, and do what you wanna do. Oh, oh. In the mountain, oh.
Man, this is so absurdly just like, I don't know, again, things have gotten pretentious. It just happened. Mother Nature got pretentious. I can't help it. So I finished the episode. I just recorded the intro that went at the very start. And I was just standing here in the woods and packing away my recorder. And a little white thing fell in front of my face. I was like, what? I looked around, and just the tiniest little bit of snow. These super duper brand new fledgling little snowflakes. I think they've already stopped now. But man, tying into that seasonal thing of hitting all 4 seasons, how fucking perfect is that? That's insane. Not only the day that I record the final bit, fucking 2 minutes after I finished recording, it starts snowing. I'm like, that's insane. That's ridiculous. Also, tying into the episode, I am lost. I walked through a part of these woods I'd never been down before while I was recording that podcast. And I just was cutting back through the woods in the general direction of where I think I'm supposed to go. But it got all swampy and marshy, and it's freezing cold, and it's like, if I take a wrong step and get my feet wet, I'm gonna really regret it today. So I'm like, fuck, where am I? Where do I go? And there's a definite limit to how much I can get lost here. In case you're Googling, this is in Fredericton, New Brunswick. It's just called the UNB Woodlot. And if you walk far enough in any direction, you just hit a highway. So if I just pick a direction and walk, inevitably I'll hit something. But I don't know, that's funny too. The snow thing is so perfect, and then why wouldn't I get lost while I'm talking about getting lost in the woods? Oh, there it is again. A little more snow. All right. Anyway, thanks again for listening. See you next time.